Hey, my name is Eli, and I am going to be going over my data visualization project. The topic we did this over is an examination of the US labor market and the inaccuracies between BLS statistics, and the arguments they make on the headlines, and that they systematically underrepresent the degree of labor market distress. And then I touched downstream of, and this is why consumer sentiment doesn't match the labor market at the moment. Um, Over the last couple of years, this topic has become more important to me specifically. One, as I am going to enter the labor market soon, and two, as this is generally important topic, I believe, for most people my age. That being said, I put together four different interactive visualizations that I'm going to be going over right now. We are going to start kind of out of order because each visualization kind of leads into the next. So we're going to start with the revisions. Right here, we have a trend of revisions made to the BLS report, um, versus the baseline they give. So going back in like 2008, you see multiple clumpings of these negative revisions, specifically during economic downturns. So looking at the recent years, it does not look great off the bat. But that's actually not the reason I decided to make this graph particularly. If you look at the graph as it goes, it's just a chronological view as we have right here. And you see the estimates as we scroll over these individual bars for the revisions. Now, it's not directly across the board, but especially as of recently, we see a divergence in a greater amount of revisions, both upward and downward, since about 2018. Um, you see the most negative. So this would typically indicate that we are in a downturn currently, and we can actually reveal this. This is just a chronological, but when we switch it to magnitude, um, we see that it's pretty straightforward for a trend line that these are consistently growing. Because the way this red line goes is it goes to the next top of the closest amount of revisions. But you see that, especially later, you're getting a higher and higher revision from the baseline. All right. This is just to show the the deviation from the baseline indicates that we are not reading the data correctly. We're just not. Um, That'll bring me to my next one. I should go in order. This is how the BLS indicates the amount of jobs that are currently growing in the market. This is known as the enterprise survey. So we see a steady growth in jobs. Obviously, COVID, we're going to have a drop off as work from home establishes. And then it looks like we have gone back up and we are above baseline. We're continuing to grow almost at the same rate. And we see a little bit level off at the end, but generally if you drew a line straight, it would be pretty close. Now, this is known as the household survey. We see that these are still very highly correlated, right? However, The household survey is significantly less, not too bad up until COVID. And then as we get further and further, we see a growing gap in workers. And this actually is just getting back to um, the establishment survey during, like, before the pandemic. And even then, it's not growing at near the same rate that it was growing before the job market, right? This line is still pretty straight, right? It's not got a lot of ups and downs comparatively to the bottom line right there is going to have a much greater gap, showing that these two things aren't as correlated as they used to be. So right here, this one is going to be U3. So the BLS comes out with two different groups, U3 through U6. Um, and U3 typically excludes discouraged workers who have stopped looking during the past year and involuntary part-time workers who want full-time work but can't find it. This is U3. And we see it tracking over time, the percentage of unemployment according to U3. And then obviously you're going to have that same spike around COVID and then going back to baseline. This is U6. As you can see, you're getting a much greater unemployment rate, right? And let me click back on this. You have a counter down here in the bottom here that shows the 6.3 million jobs, million workers hidden from the headlines, right? You see that same spike, but this is the difference. This is what people are feeling. And this level out doesn't count people after the 12-month period. So there's after the 12-month period of not having work, you can no longer qualify for unemployment and you get removed from the labor market as a whole. So this doesn't even include people who have been long-term discouraged. This is only recent discouragement, right? And the lower panel here is going to be participation and prime age ratio. So the labor participation rate measures the share of civilian, non-institutional population that is either employed or actively looking. The prime age employment population ratio shows that from ages 25 to 54, and removing the entitlement and enrollment effects distort the broader participation rate. Neither series has recovered to its January 2020 baseline despite 5 years of reported job growth. And the pre-pandemic reference line on the chart, right, which is going to be towards this way, um, it makes the gap visible, right? And you see the prime age rate versus the average participation in the market. All right. And then these bars that we're seeing on every graph, they are just known recession points. All right. We're going to go to our final graph, which is right here. For this one, we did um, have to modify the data a little bit. So we had to normalize everything to an index of 100. The four series in the chart are measured in incompatible units. So you have one in billions of dollars, one in millions of dollars, an index value, and inflation adjusted dollars. And plotting them raw would be pretty much meaningless. So you normalize all four to 100 to show the proportional growth rate from a common baseline. Um, the chart doesn't answer what the absolute values are, but how much each series grew relative to the start, its rate of change. The Federal Reserve balance sheet reached an index value above 400, meaning it quadrupled from the 2010 baseline. The M2 money supply reached approximately 256, which is 165, or sorry, 265, which is a 165% increase. Real median personal income reached approximately 115, which is only a 15% gain across 16 years. And the purchasing power line derived from the inverse of the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, declined continuously from 100, meaning a 2010 dollar bought progressively less each year. The money supply grew 2.2 times faster than real wages across the same window. We have a couple major events here. So every once in a while, during times of great strife, the government will light up the money printer. This is known as quantitative easing. Right here, we have QE2. Happens right after the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. And in 2012-ish, September 2012, we see another um, bailout for employment support. Then in 2020, we have what is known as QE Unlimited, where they printed massive amounts of money, and you see the spike in the federal balance sheet to show that point, right? And the money supply, you see this big push up right there, right? And you see it kind of mimic. It's correlated to an extent, but the federal budget outgrows the money supply exponentially. And it comes back down here, but never quite reaches it to the same rate that we had in like 2019. There's a lot, but this is the human impact, right? Um, this is going to go over. So we have the median personal income, right? This rises slightly, and it's a continuous trend, but it doesn't rise at near the same rate that we see everything else approach, right? We see the balance sheet greatly past that, and we see the purchasing power of that $100 that we had initially continuously decline. This line right here is going to represent inflation, which very closely mirrors the purchasing power of the dollar going down, right? We have noticed that it is harder now for people to um it is significantly harder now for people to live than it was previously. We see the price of real estate going up. We see the price of assets going up as the same time that we see the amount of money that is going up. because most of the liquidity in the market is forced to high yielding assets. It's why we continuously see the stock market go up. It's why if you own a house, you're really happy because that's been going up. The problem eventually settles where more people at the top of the K, the people who are wealthier, own more assets, see return on said assets at a higher rate than someone who can't afford to buy onto the ladder, someone who can never afford the assets to begin with. This is this is where the discontent in the general consumer is aimed at. We feel like we can't get to the same point that we saw parents and grandparents get. We feel like our quality of life is going down because we can't afford the same things that seem to have been afforded to generations to come before. At the same time, we see a mismatch in the way that employment is drawn up, that we are being told that there's more jobs than there ever were, that the stock market is up higher than it's ever been, that we have everything going for us. Like people who are on the lower end or that aren't don't hold the same amount of assets as people who have come before. So it seems that while everything in the economy is pointing towards really good, it seems to only be really good for fewer than the average. And that was pretty much the whole point of my paper was to show where the mismatch in sentiment not only is from what actually is, but the mismatch in sentiment from generation to generation. Um, this is getting towards the end of my report, but I appreciate the attention towards this point in the video. Um, I hope that you enjoyed.